Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at eResidency of Estonia. If you're a globetrotting digital nomad, expat, freelancer, or somebody with a business, whether that's just you or an aspiring unicorn like some of the many other unicorns that have come out of Estonia, then look at eResidency of Estonia the next time you're thinking about where to establish your business. eResidency is a digital identity issued by the Republic of Estonia, which is in the European Union, to foreign nationals, that means non-Estonians, giving them digital access to the country's advanced online infrastructure and open business environment. And when I say advanced, I mean advanced. They've been doing digital for decades. E-residents can start a company 100% online from wherever they are in the world, run it remotely, open business bank accounts, and even submit their annual reports, all with their electronic ID card. It's literally international business without borders for location-independent entrepreneurs, perfect for the About Abroad audience. The next time you're thinking about where to establish your business, look at eResidency of Estonia via the link in the show notes. Okay, now back to the episode. Today we're kicking off season 3 with someone that I have come to call a friend and that I just truly enjoy catching up with. So this conversation was super fun. John Lee is the founder of Work From Anywhere, and more importantly than that, he's just a globetrotting family man that loves experiencing life in foreign places around the world. He's lived in 6 different countries, traveled to 60 plus countries, speaks half a dozen different languages, and is just itching to get back on the road with his wife and young kids. So we had an absolute blast catching up, learning a little bit more about each other's stories, talking about what he's trying to solve at Work From Anywhere, which is a real problem, international tax compliance for digital nomads, remote workers, expats. But most importantly, we just nerded out on our love for diving deep into other cultures and living in different countries. And he has a ton to share about his experiences. So I hope you will enjoy this conversation and help me in welcoming John Lee to About Abroad. John, welcome to About Abroad. How are you doing, my friend?
I am doing great, Chase. Thank you very much for having me on today.
No, I'm really excited about it. I have to tell you, I was doing a little bit of digging, not too deep. I don't like to go too deep before these interviews, but we know each other a bit. We've gotten to know each other a little bit, and I started asking around, looking around, and I came across 2 numbers that I was super impressed by, and I'm very curious to ask you about if these things are true. One is that you speak 6 languages, and the other is that your daughter, by the time she was some age, like 4 years old, had been to some absurd amount of countries. Can you elaborate on these 2 things for me before we go too deep into this conversation?
Absolutely. So with Rosa's my eldest, and she has got the passport of dreams, basically. So we were living in the Netherlands, first of all. She's an Amsterdammer, so born in Amsterdam. And then the great thing about that is that when we were doing our previous business culture, we're traveling around, filming all around Europe, trying to understand the culture and kind of give these different culture tips. But then we sold our apartment in Amsterdam to fund the business and then moved over to Southeast Asia, to Thailand for 6 months. So during that time, we used that as a base in Thailand to go and travel all around Asia, basically. Absolutely loved it. And so it was a fantastic experience. So that's where that came. So by the time she was 17 months old, she'd been to 23 countries. And even by the time we finished there, she could do like the Thai greeting. Even now, she still remembers the Thai greeting. So that was an incredible experience for her. And then on the language side, for me, I always had a passion for languages. I had a passion for the curiosity of going deep under the skin of other cultures and really understanding what makes people tick. And in a way, what makes a lot of us tick is, on the one hand, our individual personality and our identity there, but our identity is also attached to our national culture, and being able to speak the language is a big part of that. So for me, I loved it. I learned French and German outside of school when I was younger, and then went into college, did business with German. And then when I moved over to the Netherlands, I tried to learn Dutch and managed to get fluent in that as well. So I speak fluent, obviously English, but then German and French and Dutch. And I also speak some Spanish and Irish. Irish is a great one if you don't want someone to understand you when you're going abroad.
Yeah, having spent a good bit of time in Ireland, I can attest to the fact that I have no idea what you guys are saying when
Don't worry. Sometimes we don't either as well.
I think that's the fun in it, because you can totally just, I mean, it's a very Irish way just to kind of mess with you. I actually, very funny story. I was going to propose to my wife on the cliffs of Moher, and there on the west coast of Ireland years ago. And I was super nervous, and we had a GPS, a sat nav in the car, and it was calculating the whole time. I was trying to get from Galway City to the cliffs of Moher, and it was taking me in the wrong direction. It was taking me north, way up into an area where as you know, there are people that predominantly still speak Irish.
Yeah.
And I realized, like, an hour into this trip, like, I'm definitely going in the wrong direction. The GPS is wrong, and I'm nervous, and I'm kind of freaking out. Like, the sun's gonna set. I'm gonna miss this opportunity. I stopped into a little bar on the side of the road and walked in. There was one old man sitting there with a true to form, with a pint of Guinness in his hand. And I asked him, obviously in English, like, hey, am I going towards the cliffs of Moher? And he speaks back to me in Irish. And he refused to speak English to me, or he didn't speak English. I bet it was probably the first, but maybe it was the second. And anyway, I was further freaking out, and it all worked out. I ended up reversing course and making my way to the cliffs of Moher. We got married.
It's so funny. Well, I'll tell you, I kind of a link story to that. I used to spend a couple of summers working on the construction sites when I was younger. And I'll never forget, in Ireland, we've actually got pretty strong, like, regional accents, like really thick accents. And this guy was from, I think it was from Kerry, actually. So pretty much not too far from where you were. And he was asking me, he said to me on the site, this guy said, well, you'll go away and get the journey. I said, I don't understand. Sorry, can you repeat again? He says, well, you'll go away and get the Jenny. And I had to ask the guy beside me. I said, I don't understand. What is he saying? He's saying, would you go away and get the Jenny? And I said, Jenny? Who's Jenny? Who's Jenny? Jenny's the generator. Okay. I got it. Fine. So even us Irish, we struggle from time to time.
Oh man, good Kerry man. That's great. I love it. I mentioned this before we started recording, but I do love your country, and the people, and the pub scene, the live music scene. I stayed in Kinvara, a little village south of Galway, for 6 months, and had just amazing nights in the pub listening to live music from musicians traveling through, and just so a lot of affinity for the Emerald Isle myself, and always fun to reconnect with people that are from there.
It's great to hear. I mean, one of the things for me that COVID has been an extra kind of a challenge for Irish people is that, the pub is such a social aspect of our life and connecting with each other, and to have that taken away in the last year and a half was was tough. Thankfully, we've all got, most of us have got through it okay. But I think that, that's definitely a big part of Irish culture and Irish life. It's not just about having a pint of Guinness poured. It's more actually the chats, the conversations, and that connection that you get, that deep connection. For me, a very important part of our culture. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that really struck me, especially is from the American culture, is that the bar is sort of like, the bar pub would be sort of reserved for like older people, like in our country, 21 and up. But in your country, it was the first time I was really exposed to, like, there's kids playing around there. The parents come in with, it's a social gathering place. There happens to be alcohol being served, but there's also music, and it's a very lively setting for people of all ages, and it's almost more of like a family setting. And I absolutely loved that.
Massively so. So going back to it, I mean, my uncle John Lee, they have a pub in Newport in County Tipperary. And I remember going with my cousins when we were younger, going into the pub and mixing and jumping around, having the crack, and just being a big part of our life. They had the house, and the pub was right beside it. And we go play in the house, it would be just as easy to go into the pub as well. A really welcoming atmosphere. It is. You're right. It is. It's very, very different compared to the orientation in many other countries, but it is a big part, very welcoming atmosphere. And that goes back to being more social places, meeting places, than just places to go and have a drink.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great part of the culture, and just one of the many things that I really enjoy there. But hopefully I'm glad to see the pub culture coming back. I'm glad to see the music starting to be played again, and
Yeah,
the life coming back. I've got friends there, and they're saying, yeah, life's returning bit by bit. So I'm
big
excited
time.
about that.
Yeah, I know, big time, thankfully.
And coming back to the question that I asked you, I mean, like the fact that you speak 6 languages, especially native English speakers, we don't tend to, people from the UK, the US, Canada, Ireland, like we're not known for having picked up multiple languages. A lot of times
Mm,
it's often like a joke in jest
yeah,
when you travel through other parts of Europe. You meet a Danish person who's like, yeah, I speak 7 languages, of course. And
yeah.
what do you speak, one, two? So it's pretty amazing that you managed to do that. And it's very cool that you had that interest in languages from what it sounds like was a young age.
Well, big time. I mean, the big thing for me, I'll give you some very concrete examples on this, but many people are actually different speaking a different language. They
Yeah,
have a slightly
it
different
changes you.
personality. I'll give you an example, a very concrete example. A lot of Dutch people, yeah, Dutch people are known for being direct, But what's fascinating is if you speak Dutch, they have a lot of grammatical nuances or endings to words that soften the message, yeah. But when they translate into English, it they just don't, they don't have those words. So unless you've got Dutch people who are really, really, really fluent English speakers, yeah, and Dutch people are among the best English speakers in the world. But to
Mhm.
get that like extra level of fluency, that 1 or 2%, to be able to tell a joke in another language, and get that humor, that takes a bit extra. The Dutch people that have that, of course, they get where I'm coming from here. But when you look at it in Dutch, when you translate it in English, they become a bit more direct. So English speakers, when they're receiving the messages, they feel it as if they're being a bit, maybe sometimes a bit rude, a bit too direct. But actually, when Dutch people are in speaking in Dutch, they're still direct, don't get me wrong, but they're just less so. They have these lovely little grammatical nuances that they use in their language, that make, that kind of soften the message. So how we speak in different languages, for me, it made a huge difference. And the big thing for me as well, another story on that, I remember when I used to work in CRH. CRH is one of the biggest building materials companies in the world. So I was working in the European division, living in the Netherlands, traveling all around Europe. And one of the things that I found is at one stage when I was working in the internal audit department for maybe a year or two, we were traveling around Europe, in particular, for example, to France. And the team who were with me didn't speak French. They had interpreters with them, meeting the plant managers, trying to find out what are the issues, what's going on. And they were all taking a long time trying to figure out the issues. It was a lot of work. They weren't quite able to build up the chemistry. Whereas I just literally went in, I spoke French. I said, tell me about you, tell me about your family, how do you run this business, what's going on. Oh, and by the way, I have a couple of little basic questions to check. And I come up with like a list of a whole bunch of different findings because I built that chemistry, I built that connection, so much easier. So the people that didn't speak the French were at a big disadvantage. So for me, I found it a massive way to build that relationship. And I'm very relationship oriented. So for me, it made a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. What you said about it changing the way you are, like I find when I'm speaking Spanish, I like use different hand mannerisms. I say things differently than I would actually. I make different facial
100%.
expressions. You kind of become a little bit of a different
Well,
person.
here's where that really points to. What's fascinating is 90% of our communication is nonverbal, and yet in the US, in Ireland, in the UK, we focus on that 10%.
Hmm.
But actually, how we communicate is the 90%.
It
Yeah,
is.
you go to Japan, it's nearly all that 90%. Yeah, it's about what's not said as much as what's said. Same thing in Spain. Another example of that is take for example Italy. A great example. If you tie behind your hands behind my back, I can't talk. That's what an Italian once told us. You compare that to, for example, Finland. Finland is another great example that. What is this? What is the saying? Something like an introverted Finn looks at his shoes when speaking to you. An extroverted Finn looks at your shoes. So you look at these different cultures, how we communicate non-verbally and the tone and everything is a massive part. So of course, when I'm speaking, if I'm speaking Spanish or if I'm speaking French, it's going to be a bit more va-va-voom in it, isn't there? Yeah?
Yeah,
Whereas
for
if I'm
sure.
German, if I'm speaking German, it's a bit more, it's a bit more straightforward. It's a bit more of a logical structure. There's not going to be huge intonation going on. So of course it is a little bit of a different personality. It's fascinating to dive into.
It's absolutely fascinating. I'm a total nerd for this kind of stuff. It's half of why I started this podcast, and a big reason why I love Europe so much, because it's such a unique place where you've seen so much of the world, which I want to dive into. But Europe is such a unique place in that, as you just said, I mean, you can go from Finland to Italy in a couple hour flight and experience these drastically different cultures. Even shorter than that, you can cross the Italian border into Switzerland or Austria and have a totally different experience culturally, gastronomically, linguistically, of course. Like, this is an amazing thing, especially for someone from my country, from your country, where you could drive for days and not encounter anything close to that. So
Mm.
I'm a total nerd for this kind of stuff, and I love coming across other people who can also nerd out on it with me.
Well, one of the things that's really a lot of people kind of underestimate is in Europe you've got the diversity between the different countries, but also in some cases within countries. Like for example, take Belgium. You know, the French speaking part of Belgium and the Flemish speaking part of Belgium, they're like two different worlds. I mean, they really are like two different worlds, big time. You then go to Switzerland. Switzerland, the Swiss Germans are more different from the Swiss French than the Germans are from the French themselves. I mean, it's just incredible the difference. That was my experience of it. So the diversity, the cultural diversity, the like you mentioned, the food, it's just incredible. I mean, that's one of the things I loved about Europe. Just incredible diversity that you have here. It really leaves an impression.
Yeah. Have you ever? I just happened to be here, and what you just said, it brought to light for me. But have you ever heard of the Aran Valley in Spain?
Briefly, yeah, I'm not
Uh,
a huge amount. I'm not of a huge amount of background to it, but go ahead, tell me more.
so it's in the local language there. They call it the Val d'Aran, but the Aran Valley in English, and it's a little corner in of Catalonia, which Catalonia obviously wants to secede from Spain. They speak
Yeah.
Catalonian. They have a very deep culture there. They consider themselves separate, as you know.
Mm.
So within Spain, you have these different areas where they speak not just Spanish, but they have their own local language.
Yeah.
Even Valencia, where I live, they have Valenciano, which is
Mm.
like an actual recognized language. And in Catalonia, you have this section that wants to secede from Spain. Well, this little area, which would be the equivalent to like a county in the U.S. or in Ireland, wants to. It's called the Aran Valley, and they speak Aranese. The road signs are written in Aranese. It's a different language. It looks more like
Mm.
French and Catalan and Spanish all got mixed up together,
Mm.
but it's legitimately very different. I couldn't read it, for example, very much of it, and they want to secede from Catalonia. So
I didn't actually even realize that. I mean, I
it,
knew Spain is so much, so many different regions, linguistic regions. We actually hired our first employee from Culture Me in Spain, so I've got a fair bit of understanding of it through that as well. But that's incredible. I mean, imagine trying to. I mean, it's like herding cats, trying to manage the different, federal aspects of Spain, but also like the US, even Germany is very different. Bavarian is very different from the rest of Germany. Even Switzerland. Switzerland's not a huge country, but I mean, the different cantons they have there, it's all done managed completely differently. Let's say, yeah.
Totally, totally. We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This season is brought to you by my good friends over at Insured Nomads. They're the absolute best in the business when it comes to providing health, travel, and medical insurance for nomads, expats, and really just all forms of world travelers. I know insurance is often something that's overlooked when we're fantasizing about traveling the world, but it's absolutely necessity that we address this, because often the policy you have in your home country isn't going to cover you while you're abroad. And it's also a requirement, as a lot of people may not realize, to actually buy private travel or expat insurance, as it's called sometimes, to obtain a visa or even enter certain countries. So fortunately, there are companies like Insured Nomads to help us with this. Not only do they have excellent coverage and great prices, but they're also providing a first-class experience with additional perks and best-in-class technology via their app. It's an amazing experience. I can't recommend it enough. Now, this is a company that was built by world travelers for world travelers, so they know what it's like to find yourself in a difficult medical situation abroad, and they want to keep you from having that same bad experience. So the next time you're planning a trip abroad, whether it's for a week or a lifetime, Check out Insured Nomads via the link in the show notes. Today's episode is also brought to you by my partner podcast of the week, which is That Remote Life, hosted by my friend Mitko Karshovsky. This is truly one of my favorite shows out there. It's what I go to when I want to listen to people who are building location-independent businesses and living, well, that remote life, as you might imagine. Mitko brings on his guests from all around the world who have built successful businesses and then kind of walks you through how you could follow in their footsteps. They're all living location independent, very interesting lives in various parts of the world. And Mitko himself is a digital nomad. So he is really doing a great job. I think you guys will enjoy it. He's brought on people like Phil Libin, who founded Evernote, Andrew Henderson from Nomad Capitalist, even Eric Jorgensen, the author of Navalmanac, which is super popular. So if you're interested in entrepreneurship, location independent businesses, I think you'll really like That Remote Life, and I can't recommend it enough. So learn more via the show notes and go check out That Remote Life wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, now back to the episode. Are there any other parts of the world? We'll use this as a segue to get into more of your world travels.
Yeah.
But are there any other parts of the world that just really kind of captured your heart? Like, obviously for me, I talk about this. I've seen a good bit of the world, but not spent a ton of time in certain areas. Like Asia's sort of missed me in a lot of ways. I haven't spent any time in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Are there any parts that really kind of call to you, that tug at the heartstrings for you, where you could spend more time?
Yeah, 100% there are. Yeah, there really are. I mean, for me, I've got family in the US. I've sort of a strong connection with the US. I love going there. But in Europe, Belgium actually surprised me. Belgium, and from a culture perspective, they're actually quite similar to Irish people, which surprised me. But I enjoy going to Belgium. There, just the architecture, the food, and everything. If you talk about outside of Europe, Thailand really left a mark on me. I mean, what's fascinating is, how different cultures see kids and how they see grandparents. And what you see in Asia is the incredible respect they have for grandparents, for example, for older people, but also for kids. I mean, the last day we collected Rosa from the creche in Thailand, in Phuket in Thailand, I was just overcome with emotion. I don't cry, but I cried that last day because of the incredible love this amazing woman had shown by looking after Rosa for 6 months. And I said to myself, you know what? I've learned so much. I thought in Europe, and in the US, we're pretty good with kids. Well, they take it a different level. The incredible love that was shown, it really left a mark on me there. And I have to say as well, so Thailand definitely did 100%. A lot of those countries in Southeast Asia, like Cambodia, Vietnam for me, probably one of the left the biggest mark. I remember going to Lang Ha Bay. So you've got Ha Long Bay, but then you have Lang Ha Bay, which is beside it, which is not quite as busy. I remember we went on this little gorgeous little cruise boat there for a couple of nights, and it was the most amazing experience. It was pure and utter peace. The people were so beautiful, just the kindness that was shown, and it felt like it was on a little island in the middle of nowhere. It was just pure unadulterated bliss. So there's been so many places. It's like asking a parent who's your favorite child. There's been so many experiences, but they'd be some of the ones that come to mind.
It's a total unfair question. How many countries have you been to roughly? Do you have any idea?
North of 60 anyway. Probably between 60 and 70, maybe 65 thereabouts. Yeah.
Wow. And has a lot of that been, I think I would venture to say, and I guess I'll just ask the question directly, how much of that has been sort of solo, work related versus family life?
So I would say
I think both are interesting stories.
Yeah. So I'd say half work related, maybe a quarter solo and a quarter with family. I mean, my wife Dee, I am insane about travel and exploring the world. She's even more so. I mean, she is just incredible. So it's great to be proper soulmates, to be so aligned, to know that we're going to have a big adventure. We can't wait to go off again and go traveling again. So that for me is, I would find it difficult if my wife was somebody who wanted to be at home a lot and didn't want to travel. I'd really struggle with that. And same for Dee as well. So for us to be so aligned, we can't wait to hop on the next flight.
Yeah, that road less traveled kind of unites you in a lot of cases. I think when I talk to other, especially families that travel a lot, people I've had on the show and elsewhere, if you're willing to take the kids on the road in some form or another, then you're strongly bonded together as a couple
Yeah.
through that. You have to be convicted and like, this is what we want to do. And you mentioned something when we first got started about like the like sort of the education that came from that, how your daughter still remembers how to do the local greeting in Thailand. And like I
Mm.
think about that too for the families that are willing to take on the challenges, because for sure there are challenges with moving kids around the world. But
Yeah.
if you're willing to take that on, what an awesome education for the kids. What great experiences, right?
Awesome, awesome education. She already said to us like 2 weeks ago, when are we going back to Thailand? I mean, can you imagine that? Like that was 2 years ago, over 2 years ago since we were there. And she's like only 4, and she's like, when are we going back to Thailand? So it's great to see she's got that inner kind of adventure in her, that spirit, just can't wait to go traveling again, you know? So I kind of feel sorry for Esme as her second, you know, and she, because with the pandemic, she's hardly traveled anywhere at all, you know. And then we had little Barra. He's about 11 weeks now, 10 or 11 weeks at this stage. But he's going to give Rosa a good run for his money.
Yeah, full on with three young ones. Do you expect to hit the road in some form or another with the whole family
Completely.
in
No,
tow?
it's such a big part of our identity. It's I mean, for us, like that's we're definitely done now. Three snippety whippity woo done, finito.
It's
We
it's
are
been
ready to. But
decided.
I think traveling with four, I would say 4 or 5 might be a tricky one. And I'm sure people can do it, but for us, we said no. Three is perfect. You know, I can have Barra attached to me on an ergo baby, and the two girls can walk around. We can manage that. You know, we had no problem traveling around Asia with around Europe with Rosa. I know it was only one, but we can pack pretty smartly. I mean, we just can't wait. For example, we've heard of great places like, for example, going to Dubai. Dubai is great for kids. So if you want to spend a couple of years there, that's a really fantastic place to go with kids. There's lots of others as well.
When you say travel, like you maybe you don't have a maybe you do have a firm plan, but even if not, are you talking about a couple week holiday? Are you talking about months abroad, moving
Well, yeah. So
permanently, semi
this is
permanently?
great one. This is the great thing about this new shift that we're seeing in the world, that this work from anywhere trend is just, I don't think it's registered with people how much this is going to change the quality of our lives. So on the one hand, we've got the remote work trend, but then it's work from anywhere trend, where you have people that are, if they can work from their laptop at home, then why can't they do it from another country? And okay, maybe it might be unrealistic for some people with families to move to another country. Maybe they don't want to do that, but certainly spending a couple of months working abroad for 2 or 3 months. I mean, for me, we've got our own business, so I can, no problem at all, up sticks and work in a different country for 2 or 3 months. So, I mean, I know it doesn't work for everyone. If you're in a manufacturing business or a highly regulated financial company, you won't be able to. But for a lot of us, we will. And I think that's going to really change the quality of life. I think there's going to be a lot of people are going to discover a lot more of the world. They're going to discover a lot more different cultures because of this ability to work from anywhere, abroad for a couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny enough, you mentioned that manufacturing. I literally just today in my co-working introduced myself to a new guy as I was walking in the door, and he's an Irishman that works in manufacturing. They build tractors, and his company builds tractors, and he works in kind of the IT aspect of it. But he's like, yeah, I said, are you working remotely? He said, well, we have been for the last year or so, and I guess now I am. Yeah. So he's like, I'm going to be here for a couple months, and then I'll go back, and maybe I'll go somewhere else next. And I think
Great.
this is very quickly swinging from one end of the spectrum where it was a cool trend, and maybe you saw some fun pictures of digital nomads
Mm.
on Instagram, to now going to be like, yeah, I mean, this guy's probably 50 years old, and he's doing this for the first time in his life, and he's sort of become a digital nomad
Well,
overnight.
that
And
that's exactly it. I mean, one of the things that I'm definitely seeing is that, when previous business culture meet, I was in, it was in the travel market, so I really understood what was going on with the expats, with business travel and leisure travel and whatnot. But pre-pandemic, you had digital nomads who were maybe 0.5% of the global travel market. So the global travel market is between maybe 1.2, 1.3 billion travelers on a solid year. And so digital nomads, about 7 million of that pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, they've nearly doubled to maybe 12, 13 million. So the digital nomads are the people who are typically on leisure travel visas. They're young, they're traveling around the world. They might be doing some work, but they're not declaring it, the local tax authorities or whatnot. Whereas the remote workers who want to remote work abroad, they're a very different market. They're a huge market now. So they're the people that have their home base, their home country, but maybe they want to work abroad for a couple of months a year. I think that's going to be a whole new emerging travel demographic or travel kind of a segment that's going to potentially explode. No idea how big it's going to be, but exactly that example you mentioned of that guy working with the manufacturer, and the IT. I mean, think of the experiences they're getting from being able to work abroad for a couple of weeks or a couple of months a year.
Absolutely. He's taking Spanish classes. He's learning how to make paella, and then next month he's gonna go somewhere else and learn how to speak French and bake baguettes. I mean,
Mm,
it's an epic learning experience for not just for the kids like we were talking about. I mean, I'm learning. I'm 36. I'm learning something new every day almost, and it's just keeps the mind stimulated when these mundane kind of day to day things become super interesting. And
mm.
I'm personally just like super happy that on a selfish note that it's becoming easier because it just means more and more opportunities and on a kind of for the world sort of thing. I'm like, this should be the way it is, and I want everybody to have this
I
opportunity, not
know.
for it to be a struggle to do.
Here's a question for you. I mean, do you find you get an extra spark of creativity, or think differently when you're going abroad, when you're in a different culture, a different environment? How do you see that?
Totally. I find that I get very stimulated by being in a new environment. So I'm a creature of habit. So I've realized over the years I digital nomaded for a while, right? I was bouncing around week to week, month to month, maybe 2 3 months in one place, but kind of moving frequently. And I loved it personally, but I wasn't thriving something was off.
Yeah.
And so I've sort of figured out that what I really like is I like having my home base. I like having a routine. I like going to my same desk every day and working and having my gym and my route that I walk my dog on. I thrive in this environment. But that is only for a period of time. And then
Mm,
after I get itchy feet and
yeah.
I need to go be somewhere else. And when I go to that new place, it's like a hit of dopamine for me, and my creativity skyrockets. I just
Yeah.
mentioned that I was just up in the Pyrenees and I worked from up there for a week and then did a week of vacation. And that week of work was epic. I mean,
Yeah.
I knocked out so much. I was in my best form. And so every couple weeks, every couple weeks, every couple months, I need to do something like that. And if I can get a cultural element out of it, like even
Mm,
like I just mentioned, being in the Aran Valley, different language, different
mm.
food, different type of people, just little nuances, even in the same country, it sends my creativity skyrocketing.
That's fascinating. So the way I look at it, I mean, if we look at how we're, the makeup of us and what we're all about, you've got your mind, body, heart, and your soul. But I find that going to a new culture, new environment for a lot of us, it's food for the soul. It just sparks the rest, doesn't it? It really sparks the rest. And I think I'm exactly the same. At a certain period, I get that itchy feet. I'm just craving experiencing a new environment. Not everyone are going to be like that. Some people want to be home, having the same routine all the time. I'm not one of those. For me, there's a great saying somebody said before: "There's nothing as constant as change." And having that agility to always be open to change and open to a new venture, I think it's fantastic. And just I can already see the energy you got from that break. It makes it. You can see the energy flowing right through you. Like, I mean, it's fantastic.
And it's contagious too when you're in that environment and talking to people like you who also have that sense of adventure. It feeds into itself, and it's just it's a fun environment to be in. And you mentioned this explosion of people, the number of people being able to live this way. It's a reason why I started this podcast, because as I do a lot of work for remote work advocacy as you do in my kind of day job at Doist. And I was, because of that and because of being an expat living here in Spain, as more and more people were getting these opportunities through the pandemic, I was getting an inbox full of like, hey, I want to do this too. How do I, and I was responding to people wanting to help, but I thought I can't do that all day, every day. That's not my job.
Mm,
And so it's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, was to simply answer those questions. And to most of what people wanted to know were things like what you've done actually, is like traveling with kids. And how
mm,
do I do this if I'm kind of deep in my career? I don't have a digital nomad type job. I have a regular, quote unquote, regular job. And I want to be able to move to Dubai for 3 months and see what that's
yeah.
like. So how do I do that now that I'm armed with this freedom? And So it's interesting. Like we're both trying to solve this problem and from two different angles. I think like mine was with About Abroad was more like just providing the kind of telling the stories of people who have already
Mm.
done it, because so many people think, oh, I can't do that. You know, I'm in X position, so
Yeah.
I just can't do that. And I like bringing people on like you that said, hey, I've got 3 kids and I'm going to do it, so you could too. And I love what you're trying to do with work from anywhere, which is solve a lot of these kind of logistical pain points
Mm.
that often hold people back as well. So maybe you could actually dive into that a little bit and tell us like what is work from anywhere, what are you trying to
Yeah,
solve, and the little
absolutely. Yeah.
history of where you guys are.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So the first thing to say is that, work from anywhere, believe it or not, even pre-pandemic, that did actually exist, but they just called it a different name. In many companies, they had expat transfers where you could transfer from one country payroll to another. Was very infrequent, was quite a heavy logistical exercise, but it did exist. And a lot of companies that are talking about work from anywhere now, they're wrapping that into their work from anywhere policy, let's say. But the other thing that you have coming on now at the moment is things like digital nomad visas. Particularly, they're not all the same. Not all born equal. Some wrap around tax, for example, some don't. The ones that do are fantastic. That you can go work abroad in that country. You won't have any tax risks in your home country. You're fine. You can go on your home country payroll, for example, and still work for a period of time on a business visa. Pretty much equivalent to as good as a work permit. Obviously, you've got to look at each one individually, but there's some certain circumstances that may be attached to it. But they're fantastic digital nomad visas to be able for any company to be able to offer and say, listen, okay, you can work in this country under these circumstances, and all of a sudden you can add like 5 or 10 countries or more to your work from anywhere program quite easily. But work from anywhere team, kind of the inspiration behind it was basically I remember reading a presentation from a guy called Ben Evans, and I'll share the link with you afterwards. But this presentation from Ben Evans just kind of really hit home to me. Basically, what Culture Me, my previous business, we were basically 5 to 10 years too early for the market, but we were still unbelievably close to success. We basically had launched the app that won Best Travel Technology Product in the World at the Global Youth Travel Awards in 2018. We won multiple other awards as well. But basically, because that was the B2C part of the market, we pivoted and went after the B2B side and built it all up via an API. So dumped the app, built an API, launched that in the US in 2019, and basically one of the costs of success. And then all of a sudden, COVID wiped us out. So we to kind of, in a very humble way, we to just sit back and just say to ourselves, okay, let's stabilize our family. So we had taken out, significant loans. We'd sold our apartment in Amsterdam to fund that business, but then we'd take a step back. And so what we did then was my wife Dee, she got a full-time job in Northern Trust in Limerick, and then I got working on TopTal, a remote work kind of a marketplace for high-level freelancers. Worked on that for like the last year and a half. That was absolutely fantastic for helping us get ourselves back on our feet. Did that, but then 6 months ago, this presentation from Ben Evans really hit home, and he talked about how we're at an inflection point in humanity, in the way of work and everything. And when I read that, I remember talking to a buddy of mine, Donald Rady. He's also a chartered accountant based in Sydney. And at the time, he was in quarantine in Sydney. And we said, you know what? Why don't we try and think of a new business? We might not be able to do it. But I was very conscious that I'd learned a lot of lessons in my time in Deloitte and CRH and then in Culture Me, my own business. I said, I don't want to put these I want to put these to good use. I don't want to waste them. So we started playing around with ideas. And he basically said to me, well, what about doing a long-term house swap platform like Airbnb, but for remote workers? And for me, I said, very interesting idea. But I said, your big problem there is going to be tax residency, because I had managed these risks in my time in CRH. I was the highest risk expat around the world, traveling around so many different countries. And soon as I said it, I said, well, hold on a second. Here's an opportunity. So that was the concept behind the Work Finder team, basically having a very simple tool that you could allow remote workers to go on and simply put in the country they're tax resident in and the amount of days they want to go abroad, and straight away see a map of the world of the highest, medium, and lowest risk countries they could go to. But then not only that, give them that free tool, but then connect them with a global marketplace of tax experts. And that's what we've done basically. We've got basically access to thousands of different tax experts that we can put those remote workers or the people in global mobility in large companies in touch with all these experts to help them on the policy side or help figure out those risks. Because at the end of the day, going abroad, especially if you're on a decent salary, going abroad and not, let's say, taking account of those risks, it's a huge thing to take a chance on. It's a bit like speeding. So if you're speeding on a motorway, you can be doing 150 kilometers an hour on a 120 kilometer an hour speed limit. But at a certain point, you're going to get got. And the problem is on the tax side is they can look back at your past couple of years tax returns. You can have significant fines. And for companies, you've got the individual tax risk, but then you've also got the corporation tax risk. There's employment law. There's all sorts of different risks that if you're not careful of, you can really lead yourself into serious trouble. So the days of kind of the freewheeling digital nomads of just going abroad and not telling anyone and putting in place like your home address in Texas and saying, "Oh, I'll be working from home." Those days are gone. If anything happens to you from a duty of care perspective, or if you lose the data, or if there's a significant tax fine, it can mean serious trouble for you and your employer. You can lose your job off the back of it. So that was kind of the inspiration behind how we could help the community address these challenges.
It's a great problem you're trying to solve. I can attest to the fact that this is super confusing. I've quote unquote lived in, I don't know, maybe a dozen countries where I would probably be considered tax liable by somebody if they were to know or if they were to look into it, and if I took the, I guess, the obligation on myself to clarify that, then I would probably end up, spend a month in Costa Rica one time. Do I have to pay
Mm.
taxes in Costa Rica during that
Yeah,
month? I was working, so these are the things, as you said, like people have been flying under the radar, not really thinking about it, not wanting to think about it.
yeah, 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 exactly.
And
Yeah,
That's the truth of it. Like, let's be real.
yeah,
But as you said, I have the impression, I think this is going to become a quote unquote a problem, a problem that needs solving, because we've been able to fly under the radar in a sense because it's been such a small percentage of the world population. As
yeah,
this population grows, governments are going to want their tax revenue, and
yeah.
they're going to see an opportunity, so they're going to go after this. I think I saw something where the EU just invested some hundreds of millions of dollars in basically fighting against this, like fighting against tax fraud, people skipping out on paying their tax bills by moving around in country
Exactly.
hopping and
It's
stuff.
it's
So
it's a huge risk, and ultimately, for a country's sovereignty, tax is one of the key elements of that. The borders that they have in their country. If you all of a sudden say, "Oh, it doesn't matter where you work," well, all of a sudden, well, countries can lose their tax base to be able to fund the infrastructure. When we did a survey on this a couple of months ago, it was really really interesting. On the employer side, the key concern when it comes to work from anywhere was tax was by far number one, followed by duty of care, which is understandable. For the, let's say, individual, what was even more interesting was that tax obviously was number one concern as well. But the number two one was actually interruption to kids' education. And I mean, I empathize with that. I can understand how, trying to, so if I mean, imagine if you had a solution that could solve the tax and the kids' education in one. But the bottom line, I think that kids' education aspect is also another important aspect as well. That I think there's going to be lots of innovation in that and lots of solutions that are going to come out of that over the next, 6 to 12 months.
I'm hearing about some of them actually. Yeah, I saw some info being put out by some venture capitalists who invest in remote first kind of tools and such, and one of those was very heavily involved in like education. I've heard about like nomad schools being set up in some of the big nomad hubs where your kids
Yeah,
can kind of
I think Kate
transition.
Schiffman, I think it is, has got a great one. I think it's in Portugal or Spain, if I'm not mistaken. But also you've got the likes of the Green School in Bali. Like they're a
Yeah,
fantastic school
that's it. That's
for
it. That's what I
kids.
was
I'm
hearing.
actually going to be getting them on our series in a couple of weeks' time as well. But I mean, what they have and their philosophy of education and the fact that you could bring your kids there, and not only would they in inverted commas continue their education, they'd elevate their life education. Never mind their kind of day-to-day education to get back home. So I think that's going to be a huge opportunity to be able to elevate a holistic kind of a philosophical look of how we educate our kids, and that experience of being able to live in another culture and go into places like the Green School in Bali. Wow, I mean, what a gift! What a gift that would be to your kids. Huh?
Incredible gift, incredible. I mean, I think it's the best of both worlds, where you get the structure of the schooling system, but you get the exposure to lots of different cultures and people from around the world. You learn so much just by being in a room with people from different cultures. I mean, you mentioned this before, the level of care that you saw for children, the way in which children were cared for in Southeast Asia. I had someone else on the show who mentioned this, who took a newborn to Southeast Asia, and she learned about how to do certain things, like she was like, normally we would give the kid, like in our country, like a little tub of pureed applesauce or something like that.
Yeah,
And she was like,
yeah,
but there they were like actually scraping the apple And she's like, so now I scrape the apple. Like I do it that way. I would have never had that exposure. And so it's just so cool. Like you can just learn just
Well,
by osmosis, just being there.
big time. I mean, there's layers. If you look at the second and third and fourth degree effects, this they're fascinating. But take one example. You look at the trend towards automation in the world. You look at the trend towards commoditized, transactional, low value processes, basically either being outsourced or automated. Yeah. What does that mean for us as human beings? It means that our value that we bring to any jobs in the future and the future work are going to be focused around creativity, around adaptability, around resilience, and that's what you get when you go to a different culture. When you bring your kids abroad to a different culture, they're getting the adaptability of a new environment, the creativity. That's what I find speaking different languages. I'm able to think, okay, in many ways, subconsciously, I'm using okay, there might be a particular logical approach that a German mindset might adopt, or there could be a flair or whatnot. By the way, you've got flair in Germany and flair and flair in France and logic in France as well. But you're using the different linguistic and cultural experiences I've gotten to try and help solve a problem from different angles, to connecting the dots in different ways. And doing that for our kids, giving them that experience in a different culture. Wow. I mean, what a gift that will give to hit home with these future of work themes like, resilience, like adaptability, like creativity. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, the world's getting flatter right before us, and I remember reading that book when like years ago. The world is flat,
World is flat. I
and
remember as well.
thinking like back then it wasn't in comparison today. That's been that's been put on steroids, but it wasn't nearly as flat, and you didn't have the skills to work in the flat world at that time. Your kids and kids that are growing up now, they will thrive if given those skills to be able to work in an international environment. It's nothing for me to collaborate in the same day with people from 10 different nationalities from all
Yeah.
corners of the world,
Yeah.
and without the ability to understand that perhaps my colleague from Belarus is going to communicate with me a little differently than my colleague from Chile,
Mm.
then I'm at a disadvantage. But having that experience, I can work in that environment, and that's just like the baseline. So giving the kids that exposure at a young age is almost like necessary for the next chapter of the world, I feel like.
I could not agree more. I couldn't agree more. But even when we communicate, like I do think that intercultural aspect is one that's definitely undervalued. Like, for example, how many people know that in Bulgaria, nodding your head up and down actually means no?
Right.
I mean, like, who knows that? Where do you teach that? Is that important when you're dealing with somebody from Bulgaria in a virtual setting or physical? Of course it is. Of course it is. But I think those intercultural aspects, on the one hand, having the interpersonal skills and the kind of the emotional intelligence skills, that's critical. But also the intercultural awareness, the cultural intelligence, to be able to understand the nuances of different cultures and take all your assumptions sometimes and just throw them in the bin and kind of build up from scratch.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's so interesting. Something we haven't really discussed about your journey is that you kind of managed to take what was you're an accountant by trade, right?
I give you the inspiration behind that. When I was doing business with German in college, I remember going to a lot of entrepreneurial talks. The entrepreneurs that didn't have finance experience said to me, look, it's like driving a bus with one hand tied behind your back. And so for me, I kind of saw like learning finance, like learning the language of business. And above all, I didn't want to be bullshitted by accountants. Yeah. At the time, I remember being like reading about General Motors in the US, how the accountants had more or less taken over and had brought in cost cutting, hadn't invested in design, and that killed the business in many ways, and really led to its failure like a decade later when the financial crisis came. And so for me, I was like, I never want to have accountants tell me what to do. I'm a big believer in the product side, in the sales, and connecting with the message with your customers, and empowering the sales and the creativity and the marketing teams and the product teams, as opposed to accountants. Accountants have their role to play; they are important. Don't get me wrong, but that was my inspiration behind it. I was always kind of had an entrepreneurial kind of a drive within me,
Mm.
and fascination with solving different business problems across different borders.
Got it. Okay. All right. So I'm glad we clarified. The point of me even saying that is that I feel like you have taken a path that you leveraged this knowledge that you picked up in this career in sort of a different way than a lot of people did who have this wanderlust, who want to travel around the world. A lot of people that I talk to, they sort of went in the other direction, like their wanderlust drove them to travel, and then they picked up a freelancing job, or they're a photographer, or they're a blogger, or whatever. You took sort of a more traditional route and morphed it into this career where you got to travel to 60 some odd countries, and you were taking your family to different parts of the world. And you can see that the passion for you is really like in the intercultural stuff. We're talking about, the future of education at the green school in Bali, and taxes in the same conversation. And
Yeah.
so that's sort of like fusion into one person's story is really interesting to me. And I think it's cool that you've taken this otherwise sort of like traditional career path and turned it into what you have today.
No, great point. Great point, Chase. I mean, if I look back in it, my inspiration always from a young age was I was passionate about business and I was passionate about other cultures, and so I saw international business as the key route to get into that, basically. And then when I looked at it, that's what going back to learning the language of business. That's what it caused me to go in and do a master's in accounting, and then do my 3 years in Deloitte, which is fantastic. It was like an extension of college. It was just great. It was great fun in there. People the same age. And then, going into the serious side, going into CRH for 7 years. The first 2 years was internal audit, where you're traveling all around the world into different operations, and then 5 years on the business side. But I absolutely loved it. I was on the one hand dealing with investor relations, shaping the narrative of the division at a division level. Then I was taking charge of some major cross-European cross-border projects, like massive working capital projects. And then also, for me, when I got numbers reported up to me, I wasn't happy just looking at an Excel sheet. I wanted to see what was behind it, what was behind the makeup, behind all this. So for me, it was also about connecting with the people on the ground, because I felt, from a relationship orientation, you build better connections once you met people on the ground from a financial perspective. You can build a relationship with them, let's say. And so that for me, I mean, it was such an exciting opportunity for me to be able to learn business from some really senior executives, and on the other hand, be able to go and visit these different businesses on the ground. Like, for example, like external or internal audit. Is that something that's going to get you up out of bed in the morning? Probably not. But what is going to get you up out of bed? Being able to learn different businesses, seeing how they operate, connect with different operators on the ground. And guess what? When you're doing internal audit, and I was there for those 2 years, when we were on a 3-week internal audit, you had the choice between either staying a weekend and they'd pay for your hotel, or you could fly back home on a Friday and then come back on a Sunday or Monday morning. And what was I going to do? I said, well, do you know what? I'm going to stay both of these weekends. I'm going to sample the local culture. I'm going to stay in a nice hotel. Fantastic. Like that. If you've got a wanderlust, like why would you do something like that? So really
Absolutely.
depends on the company and the culture. But for me, that was my way of servicing that wanderlust.
I can relate to you on so many levels. Something I don't talk about a ton is like I've kind of had like 2 chapters in my career, and the first chapter was in the insurance industry, and what would otherwise be like sort of like accounting, right? Like you think,
Yeah.
is that going to get you up out of bed in the morning? Like insurance policies and such. But I worked in a division of insurance which worked directly with international markets around the world, basically connecting. A lot of it was from London, but also Bermuda and some Asian markets and such, bringing insurance products to salespeople in the U.S. And we were sort of an
Mm.
intermediary for that. And so I got exposure to these things, and that got me really excited. I actually took a course in university called International Insurance Markets. We got to go to London and sit in the box, as they say, and it was such a funny, kind of interesting way to get that wanderlust thirst
Mm.
quenched, was
Mm.
through this avenue of an otherwise boring topic. But you can blur those 2 lines, and I think there's a lot of people that are looking for a way to, they're looking for, quote unquote, like work-life balance and perfect career. And I think it's okay to sometimes admit, like, it's always great to strive for exactly what you want, but
Mm.
you can also blur the lines between work and life in a different way than just like sitting on the beach in Bali with a laptop and working a little bit. You can work in a traditional
Exactly.
career. You could have a nice income. You can, have the company car, and also get to travel 3 6 months out of the year.
Yeah.
That's possible too.
No, completely agree. Completely agree, Chase. And I think it's about trying to find that mix. I mean, for me, what was fascinating about both of us, we basically said, okay, let's build a core foundation in those early years of our career and learn something that we can build a dominant logic in, and then build out from there. I think having that base to build off. And the fact we were able to, both of us, mix it with the travel aspect of it, it meant that, for us, that was the work-life balance. We were on the one hand doing jobs that, were we deeply passionate about certain aspect? Possibly not. But it was the travel aspect and meeting other people, solving problems. I mean, that's the stuff we were able to get those energy levels up. And that's, look where you are now.
Yeah, yeah, it all works out. I think just the big thing, like the big kind of life lesson, I guess I've learned. It sounds a bit corny, but like it's just to keep following whatever it is that makes you get up out of bed in the morning, and latch onto that in some way or another. Kind of put
Mm,
that at the center. There can be some periphery around that. Like it doesn't have to be
mm,
100% of who you are and what you are.
yeah,
If
yeah,
your passion is really traveling and seeing the world, like that doesn't have to be 100% of who you are for you to
mm,
live a happy, fulfilling life. You can fill out the rest with some other things, and it may not always be the most exciting thing in the world, but if it gets you what you really want in the end, then does it really matter?
there we go. Completely agree. Here, here.
I'm glad we agree. Coming back to your entrepreneurial background, you mentioned this a couple times. Your first startup and how that
Mm.
sort of or first app. I don't know if I should use the word startup. I'll let you clarify. Take us through that evolution. What you were trying to solve with the first one.
Yeah, exactly. So the concept with Culture Me, it's always at the time I had I was in CRH. I'd really enjoyed working there, a great experience. But I had literally done practically everything you could do at the age that I was at. I was maybe 32 years of age. I'd done everything you could do at dealing with up to head office at the division level and visiting the businesses up on the ground. I remember speaking to a mentor of mine and the CFO of Europe, and I said, look, I was thinking of doing a startup. What would he think? I mean, I told him I had a real interest in it. And he said, John, listen, go for it. You can always do a startup and then come back if it doesn't fit. And that kind of started me. I remember going to Startup Weekend Amsterdam around the same time and just getting the buzz of just the startup being stretched and the frenziness and the craziness of it all. And I said, this is home for me. And so that's what happened. So my wife and I, we were away in Africa on a honeymoon trip, going to 5 different countries. And it was basically when we got there, we said to ourselves, hold on a second, you've got a map to get to your local destination, but when you get there, what have you got to understand the local people? Like what you read in A Lonely Planet tells you very superficial stuff about the local culture and what to watch out for and the do's and don'ts, whatnot. You don't really get into that. So that's what we thought. We thought, hold on a second. I'd actually studied intercultural models as well, and I'd used them in business before. I'd been coaching them, I'd done training in them, and I said, well, why don't intercultural models exist in the travel world? And I started doing some research on it, and it was fascinating. People like airline pilots, like how important is communication for airline pilots? It's massively important. Yeah, turns out airplanes have crashed because of intercultural miscommunication, and yet even they don't do intercultural training courses in a lot of organizations. Yeah, it's just incredible. So I thought, hold on a second, why don't we try and build an app here that would help people navigate these different cultures, partner up with one of the big intercultural model, let's say, research platforms, plug that in together with the content, allow visitors and locals and visitors to upload the content of videos and whatnot to talk about the beauty of different cultures, and we'll write the content on the do's and don'ts and whatnot. And basically said, let's do this. But the problem was, is I had no technology experience, so I had to learn to code in Xcode because I wanted to understand the programming language. I had to build my own clickable PDFs to try and do the UX experience and do the interviews and surveys with potential users to craft around how this needs to work. And then we to find a development agency to go and build it. They launched it via the app, which the first version of it was just shockingly terrible. But then we tweaked and improved the UX and all the rest of it. The next version of it was much better, and we got better and better. But that's when it won the best travel technology product in the world at the Global U Travel Awards. We'd funded it all ourselves, bootstrapped it all 100%. But the problem was then is, despite winning that global award, and then at the same time, Booking.com invited us to the global over tourism accelerator in Booking Cares Labs. All this fantastic stuff happening at the same time. But the problem is that the cost of acquisition was too high in the B2C space. You were competing with the Booking.coms and Expedias and whatnot. So we basically had to stop the app, despite it, went really, really well. We had to stop the app and we said, okay, who are we going to target here? It's probably business travel where we need to be focusing our energies on. And that's where we're getting some traction on and some pilots. And so we had to rebuild it from scratch, launch an API in Miami in April 2019, happened to get great traction with one of the biggest travel management companies in the world, BCD Travel, pitched to 500 of their biggest clients in July 2019. And they basically said, like, just get one of our big clients and you'll be on our global marketplace. So we were like, fantastic. That's going to give us access to like 1 million business travelers. We'll be printing money. Fantastic. Meanwhile, we to get one of their big clients as well. They said, if you just get one of our big clients, you'll be on that marketplace. Meanwhile, one of their big clients separately, we had really good conversations. They're like a top 5 corporate travel manager in the world. We pitched to our LATAM team in July 2019. That went really well. And they said, okay, pitch to our global travel team. These guys have got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of business travelers themselves. So it'd be a massive account to get. We pitched our global travel team in November 2019. And at that stage, we were either hoping for an up or a down, a yes or no. They got back to us in December and said, we love the product, really, really good. We're going to actually consider implementing you guys in the next 6 months. We wanted it right now. We were like, we wanted it right now so we could go get on the marketplace and go from there. But in any case, then of course, like literally a couple months later, COVID happened, wiped out the business travel industry. Even if we it just completely destroyed us. And so having had 2 babies in the middle of all this startup journey as a husband and wife, then that happens to you, having literally bootstrapped it all, sold our apartment in Amsterdam, we made a packet on to fund the business. And then our dreams shattered, absolutely shattered. Our souls broken from it all, living with their in-laws and parents on the back of with kids, Can you just imagine all that experience now in a pandemic? So funny enough, for a lot of people, the pandemic was, really difficult. For us, it was fine. We were toughened up from the experience pre-pandemic. For us, it wasn't so bad at all. And then getting on top towel and slowly working and it's crawling our way out of this hole, slowly but surely, to getting to that point. Then, 6 months ago, I came up with, the idea to get our buddy of mine work finding our team. He just looked at me and goes, "Are you serious?" But then when I explained the idea, she's like, "Actually, you're right. There could be something in this, But then, throwing ourselves at this new idea, which I really believe this could be huge. I really think there's a huge opportunity here, and that's the reaction we're seeing, thankfully. But it's another one where we're putting our cards on the table. We're putting ourselves, in a very in a fragile place where we could be blown apart again. But I think, thankfully, Dee and myself, we are so tight. We're such strong soulmates. We know this journey is going to be tough. We know there's a lot of risk in this, but we're prepared to take it, and we can see this can have an impact, and it might be able to help out a lot of people. And if that's the case, then we're going to give it 100%, and we'll see how we get on.
You're rooted in that. You're 5 steps ahead of the game, I think. If you're rooted in actually helping people solve real problems, and you certainly are. I know the product. I can attest as someone that's moved around, lived in different countries, and also as someone who I'm not tax inept. I studied finance, I studied business, international business, and I've paid taxes in different countries, and I have a expat focused accountant that I've used for years. And so this is not something I'm totally inept in. And at the same time, I still feel underserved. I don't have the knowledge level that I want. So I'm thankful that you're solving a real problem, and I can certainly attest to it. And I have no doubt, like we said, this population of people is growing, and people need access to information like this. So I was going to say that horror story that you told made me think, if an Irishman ever needed the pub to be open, it was during that mess you were going through.
Big time. But going back to though, Chase, what I love about your podcast series, it's very much about the community, and that's what I'm also trying to do with the Work From Anywhere series, is focus on that Work From Anywhere aspect and bring a community of people together. I'm not even on most of these episodes of great people coming together and sharing it. So I think what I love about what you're doing and the people like you that I've met in this remote work world is, the generosity and the kindness that's there, the people sharing ideas, people wanting each other to succeed, and just the excitement in this kind of this growing space where it can change people's dreams. It can have such an impact on their lives. There's such an opportunity for all of us to have a really positive impact. I think that for me is also really exciting when you think about that community aspect.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I 100% agree that is so true. I've been blown away with launching this podcast, for instance. I've been blown away with the support from people who have helped not just promote it, come on the show, tell a friend, leave a review, whatever. There's a lot of support in this community, and I've thought about that, and I think it's because we've all been trying to do something a little against the grain, sort of swimming upstream for a while now, and now this is sort of becoming more mainstream. And we see an opportunity to do it correctly and do it right.
Mm.
And so having struggled through trying to figure out some of these things, a good example of this is like when I was getting this visa that I have here in Spain several years ago, there was like no information out there. Like there weren't that many people using it. There weren't, retirees or something who you weren't exactly going to find on Twitter or something, to give you some information. But now like this community has grown. There's ways to bond us together that make it, technology makes that simple. And that knowledge sharing is so at the forefront of that whole movement. So we're all just trying to say like, hey, you've got a great idea, you've got information to share, you could have helped me 3 4 5 years ago. Let's put that on at the front of the shop so people that walking by can easily access it. And I think that there's sort of a bond in that, and I'm really happy to see that, because I truly feel that way. Like people, when they write me and they say, hey, how do you get this visa, I'm glad to take 15 minutes and say, here's exactly what to do, or here's what to be afraid of,
Yeah.
or to be cautioned against. So, yeah, I love that community aspect too. And the Work from Anywhere series is awesome. Actually, you mentioned that. Can you elaborate on that so people listening know where to go?
Yeah, exactly. So from the Work from Anywhere series, so what the idea behind it was that there's a lot of focus on remote work, but there wasn't a huge amount of talk about work from anywhere and what are the challenges and opportunities with that. And so with the series, we're trying to get the biggest thought leaders in the world on, trying to focus on kind of two aspects. On the one hand, the how to make work from anywhere a reality, and on the second, kind of the future of work from anywhere, what it means, and what are the second and third order effects of all this. So what we do is every second week we'll be focusing more on the logistics and the how. It could be tax, it could be legal, it could be visas, whatever it is. And every second week we'll have much more kind of relaxed, lighter conversation about trying to get these thought leaders to look at the future work from anywhere. What are people doing? What are, where could this lead to? What are the second and third order effects of it? So I think it's a great series. I mean, I'm not even actually on. I mean, we moderator every second one, for example, but we just get a great group of panelists talking about very specific topics. It could be like the myth of work from anywhere, or it could be like traveling with kids, or it could be business travel versus global mobility, whatever it might be. We're just trying to get great minds together to try and solve it. And if people are interested in it, they can visit our website. It's wfa.team. If you go onto the blog there, you'll see all the previous episodes. We're also on YouTube as well. And we basically we do live kind of streaming every Thursday at 3 p.m. in UK time, basically. So that's where you can find us.
Excellent. Is that link? We'll put this all in the show notes, but is that link for Work from Anywhere, the product and company as well, or is that just for the live streams?
Exactly. Yeah. So for the live stream, if they follow Work from Anywhere either on YouTube, for example, or on LinkedIn, they'll be able to see all the updates there, for example, or also on the website. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, great. I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up. I'd love to just give you one last opportunity. Well, first of all, let me just say I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Just I could sit here and talk to you for hours. I think we have so much in common about our the Wanderlust there. But just from a more practical standpoint, learning a little bit about taxes and how you moved around with a family, and how you sort of parlayed an accountant career into a entrepreneurial one that's let you see so much of the world. It's inspiring, and I wish you the best of luck with Work from Anywhere. I'm happy to be following along and closely tied to some of the things you're doing with the Work from Anywhere series. So thank you for that. Thank you for coming on the show. And I would love to give you the chance just to speak really quickly, kind of from your perspective about this tax issue of traveling around the world, working in different countries, why people should take this seriously, especially as these new visas come about, and these new opportunities arise. Because I think we touched on it.
Yeah, for me, the big thing is that, if you're in a company that's got a highly mobile workforce, there's a great saying in I think there's a great part of the Netflix company culture. It's publicly available. You can take a look at it online, but they have a slide in there where in traditional industries, the top performers are maybe 2 or 3 times, the productivity of an average performer. But in highly creative industries, the top performers are 10x the productivity of an average performer. So if you're in a highly mobile company, highly mobile workforce, think of technology, think of entertainment or whatnot, for example, then those kind of companies, you have got to seriously consider work from anywhere as a policy. We've already seen Google, we've already seen Facebook announce it, Deloitte, even UBS. There's all sorts of different companies that are announcing it. So particularly if your competitors are announcing it, if you don't take it seriously, then you're going to lose your best talent. And if you don't take it seriously yourself as an individual employee and you decide to hike off without telling your employer, you're going to lose your job because it's going to land them in serious duty of care, tax, visa, and other massive problems. If anything goes wrong, even healthcare, for example, if you get sick or you're abroad, for example, who pays that? Well, if you didn't tell your employer, there's a whole bunch of issues. So for me, I see the tax side. Yes, it's important, but as part of a wider framework, there's a lot of angles to it that you need to watch out for. I think as companies, it's going to be, they talk about the new ping pong table. For me, this is going to be something that's much more important than that. I think it's going to be potentially, especially for younger generation, the number one differentiator between your competition. If you offer this and your competition don't, you're going to have a massive advantage for getting the best talent on board your company. And the great thing about it from a tax perspective, there are ways to tackle this. You've got expat transfers, you've got digital nomad visas who wrap around tax, which is fascinating. You don't have to move heaven and earth to make this a reality. That's a great thing. So Andy wants to speak to it. More than happy to have a chat with him about. And again, Chase, thank you so much for having me on board. I feel we're two kindred spirits. I really, really enjoyed the conversation, and good luck with all the rest of the podcast series.
Thank you so much, John. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I look forward to the next chat, hopefully soon, perhaps over a pint in the pub in Ireland. We'll
looking forward to it
for that.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for being Chase. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.